The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
One of the cool things about this podcast is we get to cover so many different topics, and I've learned so much since we've been doing this. In today's episode, we're going to explore another really common mental health dynamic. It's called cognitive distortion. Did I say that correctly? Cognitive distortion. Does that sound right, Michelle?
Yes.
Please describe what that is for us.
It is a way of thinking that isn't based in reality. It's kind of a trick your brain is playing on you. And maybe that's not the right way to put it, but it's kind of messages you have about the world and about yourself that then cause you to react in a certain way. And, there's some common ones that people probably already know about, like when you catastrophize or when you have all or nothing thinking or mind reading. I would say those are the most common ones that people know about. But there's a ton of them. And I'm just so excited for this show because I use these a lot in my practice. I find it incredibly helpful for people to identify which distorted thinking patterns they are using in their life, because I can guarantee it's affecting how they feel, it's affecting how they behave, and it's affecting their relationships.
And as a bonus, we're going to have a special guest today as well, who is near and dear to Michelle's heart. Who is this, you might ask?
Yeah, it's my sister. And I have to say, I'm very nervous because even though this topic is important to me, I have no idea how this is going to go. She's known me my entire life. So she has a lot of ammo if she wants to use it. No, I mean, it's definitely interesting, like putting on my professional hat and yet talking to someone I know so well.
Would you ever work with somebody who is family, and would you be able to separate yourself?
No. That's a super conflict of interest. And I think what's interesting is this topic came to mind for me because I know her so well that I know she engages in some of these distorted thinking patterns. And so I put it out to her to say, like, would you mind talking about some of them? Because we all have them. So it wasn't a judgment to say, you have some of these. But over the years, we've talked about how they've tripped her up or they've tripped me up in different scenarios in our lives. Cool.
So we'll meet Michelle's sister and we'll get some dirt on her growing up.
Great.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel Michelle, and I'm one of your hosts, Kelly. With me is my co-host, Michelle, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been providing individual and couples therapy for over 2 decades. Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships, why we do what we do, and what causes people to unrelate. Joining us today from sunny Sherman Oaks, California, Denisse. Denisse is a special guest because it's Michelle's sister.
Hello.
Yeah. Welcome.
This is a family affair. We're getting everyone involved.
Older or younger? Older. What's the age difference here?
Older, but look young.
Hey.
Maybe we should do an episode about finding out all the details from Michelle growing up.
Great. Yeah, I know. I was a perfect angel, right? All the time. That's the story we're telling today.
Actually, what was your relationship like growing up?
I'll let you take this for the first part.
Okay. I mean, to me, it felt like a very kind of normal trajectory. We were really close because we're close in age too. So, we were close growing up when we were younger. And then, of course, as teenagers, you get into the typical spats and things. But then after that, she went off to college first. But then, as adults, we are incredibly close. So not a ton of drama. And from my perspective, I don't know if I'm curious if hers would be different.
I would say mine aligns with that pretty closely. I just remember annoyances, like a little sister type annoyances. Like she would steal my clothes. I'd have to go in her closet and find them again. And she overall, and we had in high school, we had different sets of friends. So we did our own thing, but we vacationed as a family and we loved spending time together. Like we played together well. I think I only remember one time physically fighting, like we were wrestling on the floor, but I think it was more of a joke than anything. I have a lot of sets of friends sisters that physically hit each other. And I was like, yeah, we didn't deal with that. Thank God.
Yeah, and like physically, we would like do a lot of dance routines and gymnastics and things like that. That was how we physically got our energy out.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is going to go well because you gave her the opportunity to tell the story of how I peed on her, and she didn't. And so I feel like
Going to, but then I thought I'd get
she's
yelled at
going in
later.
protective mode.
I thought I was going to get yelled at later.
Now we got to talk about that.
Oh, man.
I mean, who hasn't peed on their sibling, right? Although I haven't. And for our listeners' awareness, if you hear little snorting noises, it's not me. Denisse has her two really adorable looking little French bulldogs
Yeah.
sitting next to her. What are their names again?
They're Ivy, who's 4, and Bree, who's 2.
And Ivy and Bree have they're influencers.
Uh-huh. Are they really?
I don't know. But
They have their
there's
own
very
page,
cute pictures of them online.
They have their own page, but that requires their mom to actually post and do things, and I'm not a social media person, so I don't do it that often.
The reason we're having Denisse on today, and I think this is actually a really great segue, we want to talk about the concept of distorted ways of thinking.
I'm so excited to talk about this topic. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And I want to give a little context because it's hard to understand what we're going to talk about without some kind of historical reference. So in therapy, there are a bunch of theoretical orientations. And people know that mostly like psychodynamic or cognitive behavioral, or, those are the ones in the common vernacular, but there's a ton of them. And what they are is just a framework of how someone conceptualizes someone else's psychology. So psychodynamic, it was something in your childhood, how you grew up, how you were parented. That's why you're in distress right now. Cognitive behavioral is like the way you're thinking is affecting your life right now. And so what we're going to talk about today are called cognitive distortions. You may also have heard of them called distorted thinking patterns or distorted ways of thinking. And what it is it's the things we tell ourselves about the world, about who we are, that make us respond in a certain way. It's how our thoughts affect how we respond to the world. So many people can relate to this. That's why I'm so excited. I would say, if there was any psychological dynamic that we could claim is universal, Kel, you and I talk a lot about, this whole show is about all the universal things that we do across the board. This one to me is probably number one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would be so bold as to say every person in the world, or that I've ever met at the very least, has some kind of cognitive distortion, a way of thinking that is skewing how they feel and how they act.
Mm-hmm. Who came up with this concept? Freud?
It was definitely not Freud. Freud did not care so much how you think. No, psychodynamic people out there are going to be mad at me for saying that. What I would say is all of the different therapies and theoretical orientations that have a thought component to them could use this. And I would say, I have these handouts and I'll give them to my clients and say, hey, this is like a list of cognitive distortions. Why don't you read through it and tell me if any of them resonate with you? And 100% of the time, I'm telling you, in 20 years of doing therapy, I have never once had someone not be able to relate to at least one of these. Most of the time, it's someone reading this and saying, oh, that's totally me, or, oh, I do that one. Or there's like a recognition almost immediately when someone reads one that says, like, that describes me to a T. We can talk, Kelly, because I gave you this worksheet recently. And even you, who is so well adjusted in life, I would say, could pinpoint one or two that you're like, yeah, I think I do that one.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this worksheet, 15 common cognitive distortions, and I recognize a couple of these in my thought processes.
And I have to say, so you have these distortions, and then one of the biggest ways they rear their ugly head is in relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's really important to know which of these traps you fall into, if we want to call them that, so that you can intervene on your own behalf. Because if you're someone who, and we'll talk about these distortions, but if you're someone who skews a certain way of thinking, you're going to come up against that in a relationship where the facts don't match what you think about the facts. And we always talk about how, you don't have to believe everything you think. Have you heard that before? That's
no.
kind of okay. So that's just kind of something we say in psychology. You don't have to believe everything you think because our thoughts are so powerful. We take them as fact before we even know if they're true or not.
And this leads back to our wonderful guest today, Denisse. We want to talk to you about cognitive distortions you may be experiencing.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I have many. I would say that overall, the one that I feel I relate to best is catastrophizing. I guess in a way, it's something that I've been doing pretty much, I would say, since my 20s. It's something that I've been working on, and I've definitely found ways to alleviate that or at least make it less so. But I tend to feel like something bad happens, and then another bad thing happens, and then like my mind immediately goes to the worst, and that it's never going to get better, that it's always going to be like this, it's always going to feel like this, and it's definitely affected my life. I don't know about in relationships per se, but in general.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, you want to define what that term means?
Yeah, and I think Denise touched on it, but it's thinking that there is only one outcome, that which is going to be the worst possible outcome. Mm-hmm. So your brain goes worst case scenario right away.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we could all relate to that at some point, right?
Yeah, and especially if historically that does happen. So that kind of negative reinforcement pattern of, something bad happened already, like Denise said. So the next thing that happens, I'm more likely to think the bad outcome is coming because it did last time.
So Denisse, why do you think you do that?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if it's something I did all along, like as a kid, and then just continue to do so. I have been to therapy throughout my life, and sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't, but it's something that I worked on there, and it's something that I'll probably be working on lifelong because, like I said, I have ways to combat it, but I don't always use them, and sometimes it takes people to remind me to use them.
Can you give us an example of maybe a recent catastrophizing?
Absolutely. Basically, when I bought my townhouse, I put in floors immediately downstairs. I ripped up the carpet and had floors put in, and I had friends of friends do it. So it was very informal, but it was done before I moved everything in. After that, I had carpet upstairs, which when I got Ivy, my first dog, she was allowed up there, and between peeing and ripping things up, because she destroyed a lot of things, the upstairs carpet was completely damaged and a nightmare to look at. But it's been 10 years, and I knew that this project was going to be a big project to have to move all the furniture, the beds. I have 2 bedrooms upstairs, and I knew it was going to be a big deal. That's why I put it off for 10 years. So finally, I hire the people, I get ready, I pack everything. Like, we're talking packing clothes and just everything in your life that's on the floor or on a counter or on a dresser or whatever, books, packed my life away. And then I find out, what's the smirk for? Sorry, you might have to take that.
You're just hearing the dog.
Oh, okay. Why is this funny? Is this the story too long?
I can't hold my laugh.
It's funny for 2 reasons. One is the dogs, and 2, I was about to call you dad because the story is getting long.
I know, but
the dog is cracking me up. Sorry.
How much brain work went into getting ready for this construction. So yeah. I was excited. The guys are coming. I put off working out. I put off going out with friends because packing your life is really, really difficult. So, sorry, I have to put the phone down so I can take the dog on the couch. So anyway, finally they come and they tell me, we can't do the project because you guys need a subfloor put in, and we don't do that. So they literally packed the stuff and left. Before they packed the stuff and left, they ripped up the carpet. And underneath the carpet is nails and pieces of sawdust and everything you can imagine when you rip up carpet. And I was like, what am I do? And they were like, well, you can hire a company to put in a subfloor, or we can't help you. So here I am, all my stuff's packed away. I have no carpet. I can't walk upstairs. And I literally sat there like in tears. And what
Mhm.
happens when I catastrophize is I become immobilized. Like I can't figure,
Mhm.
I become so stressed out that like I can't think of a solution. And I was just, and it literally caused me to be depressed for like 2 days.
It's funny you use this as an example because I think that many people have had horror stories when it comes to home improvements.
That's
So
that. All
don't
my friends,
feel,
oh, this is going to be, this it's a process and it's always going to cost more than they said. And I was like, I know, and I can handle that, but nothing's even moving forward. Like, I
yeah.
don't mind them spending extra money, but like right now, everything's packed away and I have nothing moving forward. So I sat around depressed for a day. And then the next day, and I allow myself time to do that. And that's one thing I learned in therapy. But then the next day, I became proactive and I was like, this is going to have a solution. It's going to get fixed. I just need to start the process over and go with a different company. By the very next day, I had 3 people coming out, contractors coming out to give me estimates. And by the end of that day, I had a solution. And I was like, see, like this is going to happen and the floors will get put in and eventually I'll unpack and it will be okay.
And trying to regain a sense of perspective is a good countermeasure to catastrophizing.
Mhm.
That's one of those coping tools you talked about. What I'll also say is one of the things that distorted thinking patterns do is they strip you of the opportunity to have a valid reaction to a hard situation.
Mhm.
So it is stressful, and anyone in a situation where something went horribly wrong and it's going to require a lot of work would feel similar. And sometimes when you have a distorted thinking pattern, you skip that step of just validating for yourself, okay, I'm actually having a normal reaction
Yeah.
to a situation, and you go straight to the distortion.
So in your mind, Denise, this happened and you're like, oh shit, this is really bad. And it almost snowballed in your brain. And then that first day or the first 12 hours, you were literally like, what am I going to do? This is horrific. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Kel, that's another term for catastrophizing. So catastrophizing could also be called snowballing or going down a rabbit hole or downward
Hmm.
spiral. If you can relate to any of that while you're listening, those are all in the similar category as catastrophizing.
Hearing this now, Michelle and Denise, I feel like I do this a lot more than I realize because I can think of many examples where I have overreacted to something. I'm not minimizing your feelings because it's clear this was a big deal. Home improvements are a nightmare, but I'm just saying there's been many situations where I've catastrophized something. A conversation I've had with somebody, and then wait a day, and then it kind of just settles itself.
Mm-hmm.
So now I think what I'm doing, what sounds like what you did too, Denise, is you kind of just took a step back and just took a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you just kind of let that process a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you acted.
And then it was financial because it was going to
Yeah.
cost a lot more. But also, the original company wasn't going to give me my security deposit back, or not security deposit. Sorry, my deposit that you have to put before they come and they order the materials, and that was significant. So I was
Hmm.
pissed at them trying to deal with that, and then I said, you know what? I will deal with that once I move forward with the new project. And all it took was me relaxing, thinking of the long term, and also finding a contractor who was amazing, who eased my fears, who told me we'd work together, who literally made sure that the guys were doing what they were supposed to the day of. Because a lot of times it's the sales guys that come and talk to you and not the people doing the work, but he was here throughout the process. And it just within that day, when they did the installation, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
When I catastrophize, it's important to realize in my own mind that okay, it's a shit show right now, but I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
This is going to work
Right.
out.
And looking at historic proof of that. So
Mhm.
trying to institute a little bit of logic, even in a moment when you're emotional, to say, like 85% of the time that something feels catastrophic, it has actually worked out.
Mhm.
and that can help someone feel a little bit more confident.
Whenever something bad happens, and bad can be described in so many different ways, my mind immediately catastrophizes. So I can think of a million examples, but I think that the other thing that I've noticed with my distorted ways of thinking is when things change, or friends don't react how they normally do, or things change. It's hard to explain, but I immediately assume that I did something to cause it. And what I've noticed through different learning different things, workshops, therapy, etc., that 99% of the time people are into their own world and it has nothing to do with you.
And if I can jump in, that category of cognitive distortion is called personalization, where you blame yourself unnecessarily for things that aren't likely to do with you.
Right.
I was just going to say that I've experienced a similar thing, but I realize everyone has their own lives, and people aren't thinking about you. Like when you think, you assume they are, but they're really not,
They're not. But also, I guess this is a question for you guys, is what happens when it is correct? How do you gain closure when somebody decides they don't want to be in your life anymore after 20 years, for example, but they won't tell you why? So that's an example where I did take it personally, and it ended up being something that I did, but I don't know what it is. And so I have to move on from losing a friend with no closure.
And it's hard for me to be objective, so I don't know if you want to include this, but like I can't imagine, like, to me, if you are ending a friendship after 20 years and you don't have the courtesy or respect to tell the other person why, to me that is just like the lack of character that someone has to have to be that way. Like, it's just such a shitty way to do it. It's fine if you want to end a relationship, a 20-year relationship, but to do it without being respectful or kind or compassionate about it, to me is just inexcusable. And it's a personal thing right now.
But also, one thing that makes it easier is knowing that I did what I could to ask questions, but not giving somebody the grace to apologize. Like, I mean, with my friends, my close friends, I'm not afraid to tell them if I'm upset at them about something. And with this particular person, I have in the past, and they've apologized and we move forward. And I can't imagine what could have possibly happened that was something that in the end couldn't be forgiven. So
let's unpack this a little bit. Were you ghosted?
Yes, I was ghosted, but finally, after like trying to make plans and cancellations and things like that, eventually I said, "Are you mad at me? Did I do something to upset you? And please let me know so we can talk about it." And finally, this person responded and said, "I'm not mad at you, but I don't want a relationship anymore."
Well, that couldn't be any more clear.
But it's just so asinine, It's like,
why?
This wasn't like a 2 dates with a romantic person. This was a 20-year friendship.
And I said, "What happened? What did I do? Can I have a chance to talk? Can we talk about this?" I said, "You've been my friend for 20 years. We have so much history. You mean so much to me. Why can't we talk about this?" And never responded ever again. Now, I will say, I've been in this person's life so long that I've seen this person do it to other people. And I've been there when they're having the discussion of, "I don't want a relationship anymore." In fact, I feel like that's a text I've seen this person compose to others. So I think,
wow,
not getting a response was the hardest part.
Michelle, this sounds like this is the other person's problem, not Denise's.
Yeah, but if we're gonna categorize her as a distorted thinking pattern, like, that's all or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking. It's like all good or all bad. I'm in or I'm out. And a lot of people have that kind of inclination.
Relationships can fade over the years. I mean, I haven't talked to some of my friends in a really long time, but I haven't necessarily said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore." That's
Right. And I have friends that I was very close to when I first moved to LA, and not anymore. But life changes. We all go through things, good and bad. And I didn't fault them. They didn't fault me. There was never a falling out. We just don't talk that often or at all. But this was like blatantly
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to hurt you, or I don't know. I don't know. But going back to the distorted ways of thinking, 99.9% of the time for me, what I'm thinking others are thinking about me is not the case. This particular time it was, but all the other times it wasn't, it isn't. And I'm someone who's very affected by other people's tone and other people's mood. And when my mom like is short with me, or my sister doesn't want to talk, I take it personally. I used to take it personally, and now I know that that's just them, and that's just, it's okay. And so I try not to be affected by tone, but I still am.
Well, I mean, us one of the things we're getting kind of a flavor of another cluster of thinking patterns, which is kind of in the jumping to conclusions category. So people who do mind reading or fortune telling, it'd be nice to talk a little bit about that, because that's something I see a lot in my practice with couples. Is one of them will kind of make an assumption about something without any proof or anything, but they just decide that they already know how someone feels or what they're going to say, and so they then end up having the feelings and reactions based on that assumption rather than what's in front of them.
I just want to follow up one with Denisse really quick too. I've taken this approach, and you can take it or leave it. But if somebody is a negative person, or they are a negative part of your life, I recommend, or what I think there's a world where you just cut them out, and you just say, okay, enough's enough. I'm not going to accept this, and I'm not going to have a part of my life. And you can say that out loud, or you can just choose to just move on. But
I think so too.
that's the approach that I'm taking. I think as I get older too. Is that a distortion, Michelle, or is that just an overall just?
No, I think that's a recognition, like, of trying to have a healthy boundary. But the way that you display and present your boundaries is important. So maybe this friend had a boundary they wanted to set, but the way they did it was just unacceptable, in my opinion. And I think that we've really bastardized all these mental health terms right now with this whole wellness culture to say, oh, I'm setting a boundary, or, this is my I don't know, like all
Yeah,
these terms that we're using now, and no, people are using them without actually like using them correctly. Like they're using the words, but they're not doing it the effective or kind way.
yeah. Wouldn't it have been helpful to Denisse, maybe what that behavior was that upset her friend, and then either have some sort of corrective measure?
And even if the friendship couldn't be saved, to say, like, if I ever cared about you in these 20 years, I will give you the gift of knowing why I'm ending this friendship. And I think my sister was clear, like, I'm not, if that's your decision, that's your decision. I'm not going to get on the phone and try and change your mind. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can't take 5 minutes in a text or something to say, like, you know what, just overall, to sum it up, this is why I'm walking away from this friendship. That's intentional, like, hurtfulness, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because the investment of taking 5 minutes to do that for a person is not that, like, oh, I couldn't find the time, or.
So Denisse, moving forward, if this person were to reach out to you and say, "Oh, my bad," what would you say?
Throughout my past, I've been somebody who holds grudges, but people have given me grace, and therefore I've learned through just maturing and through experience that holding grudges really does nothing for me personally, and it just affects me then it's more than it's affecting them. And so I would absolutely forgive,
Mm-hmm.
find out why, and I would talk about why it was hurtful to me. But I would forgive. And there's people that I've had relationships with throughout my life that have done that. Like I've forgiven them, they've forgiven me, but we didn't for like 10 years, and now we're talking again. So people come and go in the ebb and flow of relationships. So I would absolutely forgive that.
Yeah, and forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for the other person.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good example, actually. Personalization, blaming yourself. But then again, it sounds like maybe she shouldn't have been, Michelle.
I think the point is that's where her brain went. And that's what I want people to take away
Yeah.
is you have these distortions where
Yeah.
when something happens that your brain goes to a certain place. And the goal is for you to know what that place is, know that it's happening, to say like, oh gosh, I'm personalizing, and then do the things Denisse talked about, slow down, try and counter that with fact, validate how you're feeling, and try and, think of ways for that not to be the lead to your response. I'm
And
not
I
saying
think
you're going to get rid of your distortions like completely, but knowing when they're bubbling up is helpful because then you can choose a different way of responding versus just the instinct of that distortion.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, to piggyback on that, I think that it's okay to feel those feelings.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be in that feeling and in that moment and not being like, oh my God, I shouldn't be thinking this. Oh my God, I'm thinking what my thinking is wrong. To just let it flow and then handling it and coping as well.
Yeah, and that's a huge aspect of mindfulness, right? And meditation, the idea of just letting the feeling come and go and not judging it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's another distortion. If you start judging yourself for how you feel.
And that's something I dealt with in therapy. Like, it's okay to think what you're thinking. It's not okay. So just let it be, let the thoughts be there, and then let the thoughts go. One of my therapists used to say, you're on the train to hell. You can stay on the train and ride for a little while, but then jump off, get off, and move on to the next stop. And that really helped me.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could call a roller coaster too, couldn't you? I mean, it's kind of similar,
Yeah.
up and down.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to throw up, that's okay.
Right? Sometimes you want to ride over and over, like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking at this list, Michelle, magnification and minimization are standing out to me. And I'm not sure if that's something that Denisse, you can relate to, but I find that I exaggerate mistakes that I make or negative qualities sometimes more than I probably should. And maybe it's just me beating myself up a little bit because I tend to do that too, but like I should have done a better job at something. But
well, Denisse, before you answer, let me define, because magnification and minimization are twin flames. They're kind of the same thing, which is amplifying the negative stuff about you and minimizing the positives or the strengths.
mm-hmm.
And so just wanted to define that for the folks.
Yeah.
I do tend to, I mean, this is kind of where the catastrophizing comes in too. I think for me, more than that, my thinking is all or nothing. So either everything is good in my life or everything is bad. It's hard for me to see an in between sometimes. That, for me, is something that just because like one bad thing happened in your day doesn't mean it's a bad week or a bad month or things are going downhill. It's just it's hard to get out of that all or nothing thinking for me.
We have this situation here. Speaking of pets, since we have this pet theme today, Michelle, you've been to our place. We have this backyard area, and I made the mistake early on of letting our kitten go out in the backyard.
Aww.
It's fenced,
Yeah.
right? It's about a 5.5, 6 foot fence. He was great for the first 4 years. Okay, he stayed in the yard. Suddenly, a switch went off, and he's decided he's going to become a like a werewolf. He just wants to go out into the neighborhood, and I can't keep him in the yard. And I've put up this like a bamboo fence on top of our fence, like, and extended it. He's broken through it now, and he's finding all these exits.
What's
And
the problem with that? Does he not come back? You got to go looking for him?
Yeah, I've had to go out looking for him at night with a flashlight. I'm worried about it. We don't want him out, around. I mean,
Of course.
that's just not safe. There's coyotes and, traffic. And he's dumb, he's not the smartest cat in the world. So I guess, but I keep, every time this happens, I keep beating myself up going, damn it, I should have done this. I didn't fix that part. He's like, I need to do this. And every night, my wife's laughing at me because I'm just like getting so frustrated because he keeps foiling my plans. And I guess I'm magnifying my mistakes because I'm
Let me
like,
tell you,
I
don't
Well,
ever
you are being
don't
outsmarted by a
ever
dumb
get a
cat.
puppy.
So
Don't ever get a smart puppy because you will. I thought I outwitted and she managed to everything I did as well. She managed to um find a way. Like she moved her. I had like a pack and play sort of situation where she would be in there. It wasn't like she'd be in there and she'd be so she could look around the room, but she couldn't get out when I was gone. We're at work, but she managed to move the whole thing over to the wall and chew a hole in the wall. So it really didn't make a difference whether she was in there or not. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to put like a brick or two to keep it down so she can't move it. And there was always something like your cat. Like I thought I outsmarted and
did you find yourself beating yourself up then, like I am?
yes, but and I still do sometimes, but I realized that having a puppy will destroy your house, and everyone said it, and everyone knew it, I just had to accept that fact. And once I did, and I knew they're just things, and sometimes I'm like, would I rather have a messy floor and toys all over the floor and all these and like ripped up? She chewed through my blinds and my off my balcony. Would I rather have that and then just fix these things slowly and surely or the love of the dog? And the dog always wins. So
Mm-hmm.
it's worth it to me. Come on. Can you resist this face?
for listeners out there, the one of the pups just showed up on the camera, and it's the cutest thing.
Yes. I think, our desire to keep them safe is not as strong as their desire to get out. It's
Correct.
like ultimately it's a contest of wills, and their will is beating our will.
Correct.
And also, I mean, it's a cat, so your wants and needs are not even remotely important to this cat.
Exactly.
Could give a shit.
Right. I always think it's interesting when you're a cat person or a dog person. Like,
There
to
are,
me, that tells you something about someone's personality.
but you can be both. I'm both.
Yeah, you can be both for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But there are dog people who like can't handle the rejection of that a cat presents
Yeah,
every day,
you're
like
right.
the rejection of love.
You're right.
And then there are cat people who are like, I don't want something like unconditionally loving me all the time.
What's funny because we had a cat before, and he loved me, but he didn't really care about my wife. But now
Yeah,
he's
I
gone,
remember.
and we have a new cat,
Aw.
and he loves her, and he can give a shit
How
about
about
me.
you?
So
That's
I've been struggling.
hurtful.
I've been struggling with that myself. Yeah, I'm hurt by I'm butt hurt by that. But because I would argue I give him twice as much love as
Do you feel as though it has to do with who spends the most time with the cat or not? It's just preference.
No, because I spend probably double the amount. I think it has to do with his
Right.
preference, probably for I don't know. I think her soothing tone, maybe, and her
Yeah.
her energy,
Yeah.
maybe more than mine. I don't know, so Michelle. Sorry, we went on
No, that's
this tangent. I didn't really mean to, but I was just trying. I was looking at the list. I'm looking at magnification. I'm thinking, oh, what have I done recently that I feel like has exaggerated a mistake or something in me that I feel like I'm not doing a good job of.
Yeah, and also magnification often leads to another category, which is labeling, which is then saying, instead of like this one incident was maybe I, did a dumb thing at work versus now I've labeled myself as incompetent or unable to do my job. Or, you extrapolate from something small that you felt. And I guess that would also be generalization, is making it now a statement about who you are. And that reminds me of our show about shame, because that's what ends up happening, is triggering those feelings of shame.
So moving forward, Denisse, what's your thought process, especially since we're now in this position where we can talk about it and deconstruct some of these?
One thing I've learned in all of this is that thinking is just thoughts. They don't control you. You can develop techniques to help yourself so they don't control you. A thought can come and go, like getting on the train to hell. Sit with the thoughts. They're okay to have, but move forward and don't let them consume you. And when they do consume you, that's when I know I need to talk to a friend, talk to a therapist, find ways to cope. For me, self-care is very important. Things that bring me joy. Working out, exercise puts me in a better mental headspace no matter what.
Yep.
And just finding ways that all of these things, these distorted ways of thinking are okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you have a mental illness. It just means that, these thoughts come, they go, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I want to reiterate, every single person on earth has some kind of distorted thinking pattern.
In your practice, what are some of the most common?
At least with couples, I see a lot of what you were saying, I should do this or I should do that. That they, especially in our culture where you're comparing yourself all the time to other people with social media, it's like, I should be at this point in my life, or you should be filling this need for me as my partner. And I think a lot of mind reading happens too. Instead of having conversations with your partner, I'm seeing a lot of people just make assumptions or guesses, and it's not usually correct. I would say like there's also societal distorted thinking patterns. So I want to highlight blaming is a huge one right now. Like taking no responsibility, blaming someone else for your struggles, for what's going on in your life. And then emotional reasoning. I mean, I think when I think of that, I think definitely on the political stage, we've got a lot of people believing that just because they feel something, it must be true.
But overall, isn't emotional reasoning okay?
Yes, if you use the term like in a different way. So this is a particular distorted thinking pattern. It's called emotional reasoning. It's not the same thing as like positive emotional reasoning.
Can you give an example of what positive emotional reasoning looks like?
Yeah, I would love to open that up to all three of us. Like if you can think of a time where I think what you might be getting at, Denisse, is like when you are talking yourself through different feelings. So maybe you're feeling angry at your partner. This happens a lot. And so you're trying to figure out like, why am I feeling this way, or what's going on?
So it must be true. If you feel this way, it must be true, right?
That's the distorted way of emotional reasoning. So that piece would be, because I feel that my partner, was disrespectful to me. It's absolutely true that he was disrespectful to me. Whereas maybe the situation isn't that black and white. It's like you felt disrespected for some reason, but
it was unintentional, maybe. It certainly didn't mean to.
Yeah. So a lot of people who take unintentional things as intentional, that is a good example. That happens a lot in relationships.
Like if you get angry because somebody cut you off driving, let's just say, you feel anger. So it must be true that he cut you off. And he did. He physically cut you off, but he probably wasn't thinking. I'm going to say, give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I'm thinking more like what Denisse was talking about in terms of like if she'll call me and I'm busy or distracted, my tone may seem abrupt or harsh, and I might not even notice because I'm busy thinking about what I'm thinking about. But to her, it felt like, oh, she's mad at me.
Okay, that makes more sense.
I always say, that there's a question in therapy where, like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do with it? How would you make your life different? It's called the miracle question. But I can understand my pettiness when I think of that question. Because like for me, if I had a magic wand for all those like really selfish and considerate jerks on the road, I would just have them get food poisoning for 3 days. That's what I would do with my magic wand. Isn't that kind of sad?
Food poisoning?
I'm not curing world hunger. I'm just like trying to have someone who did a jerky thing on the road be uncomfortable for 3 days.
So is it a jerky thing to do to take a parking spot and the reaction is to slam a badge on the windshield?
Well, I commend you because, my sister had a badge at one point, and if I had it, I think I would misuse it. It would be really hard for me ethically not to throw that thing around.
It'd be tempting. You did earn it. You did earn it. Was it use it or lose it?
Saved the day many times. So
yeah, I bet.
And it's interesting because my background, my undergrad is in psychology, my master's is in forensics and criminal investigation, and a majority of my career was in law enforcement. And then I left law enforcement and had to detach that identity that I had there, which also kind of going into distorted thinking, I had to put on a shield, like in literal terms, like not literal terms, but like I had to bottle up every emotion that I possibly had for the entire time I was with the feds, because you're not allowed to show emotion, you're not allowed to show weakness, you're not allowed to show mental health issues. Eventually, they had so many suicides among police officers and federal agents that they developed counseling for that, and now it's talked about all the time. I have colleagues that are still there, and they talk about mental health awareness is number one on the list. And so you've seen this like shift that has happened, which is necessary and very good, but it's still not there. And you still hear about police departments. In fact, recently, LAPD
Mm-hmm.
officers committing suicide, like 4 in the same department. And it's because you're not allowed to feel what you feel, at least not show it. So that was
Well,
hard for me for many, many years. And then it felt great to leave and be in an environment at social services again, which is what I did when I left. And now I work with children and helping them with their emotional health. It's interesting to see how things have shifted.
you hear about that a lot too with like our armed services, and
Yeah,
especially with the veterans and how they come back from serving overseas, and they are struggling with the mental health issues, and that's something that needs to be provided because there's a lot of high suicide rates among
exactly.
veterans as well, which is really really sad.
One question I have is, because now our society is so woke, quote unquote, and mental health awareness is more talked about, but there's still a stigma with getting help. Why is that?
I think men still probably drag their feet a little bit about that because they want to look tough.
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting because you're hearing more and more about mental health, especially in the workplace. I would hope that attitudes will change.
But I can tell you, the whole time I saw a therapist when I was with the feds, I never told my work about it, ever. It was like, no way.
Is there job security concerns?
Back then, yes. Now, probably not, because they have, what is it called, Michelle? The
like employee assistance
yes,
programs.
exactly. Now they have that. And so, and if you have an issue, they will refer you, but that didn't exist.
The good news is that people are learning these things are really important.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part is we're paying the price for our stubbornness and ignorance and not addressing these issues.
Correct.
But I'm glad you brought it up. Actually, it's really great. I mean, hell, that would have been another show.
Yeah.
It can be.
I will admit openly that I was kind of dreading this, to be honest, guys, because it's not that I don't like to talk about myself. I go to focus groups and I'm the person that's fighting to talk.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't like to put out my weaknesses and dirty laundry.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Especially for a global audience.
Yeah.
Did I just scare you?
Yes.
Global audience.
We are. We're international. Yeah, I love that you said that though, because a lot of people are reluctant to be guests. And I've said this before, but every time we have a guest on, they walk away saying, I'm glad I did it. You didn't make me cry. You weren't trying to
Has anybody cried?
I think so, but
Well, our goal is to get somebody to cry.
yeah, I don't see anything wrong with crying. So there's no judgment there. But there's some people who poke around in order to be provocative or, to expose someone's vulnerability in some way. And that's not the vibe we have for our show.
No. We want to create an environment where people will be comfortable talking about things.
And because everything you said, whether you felt like it was either too vulnerable or if you second guess sharing it, someone out there is listening and is going to be like, oh, that's me, or I can relate, or I don't feel as alone in how I was feeling about that.
Well, Denisse, it's been wonderful speaking with you today. We thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about these distortions that everybody can relate to. And certainly you've done a great job of giving us some examples of distortions that you've personally struggled with. So thank you again for coming on the show.
No problem. It was great to talk about these things. One thing I've also learned is the more you talk about it, the easier it gets to talk and cope, and for other people and for yourself. So it was enjoyable. Thank you.
So we finally got to meet Michelle's sister, Denisse. How exciting was that?
Yeah, I obviously have been trying to get her to come on the show for a long time now, and she was just really hesitant. But I'm very grateful that she decided to keep an open mind and try it. And that in the end, she did show some vulnerability in a way that I think is going to be helpful for people.
It's funny because I had never heard of these cognitive distortions, but now that I have, it's like, well, it's like a no-brainer. Of course, these things are part of our everyday lives. I think after doing this episode, something I may be more aware of in my own life.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we can tell our brain is maybe not reacting in the most rational way, but we don't always have a name for it. And that's why I love these handouts that show all the different categories, because then you can say, oh, you know what? Right now I'm catastrophizing. And usually when you name a feeling or you name a thought process, it takes a little bit of the power away from it and gives you a chance to like get some distance from it. And that's what you need then to be able to respond to it.
Do you think these distortions change over the years too? Like for example, if you have a distortion as a child or as a teen, will it just naturally go away, or is there work that needs to be done?
But I think both, actually. When you mention teens, they're a whole other category of people because their brains are really trying to rapidly develop cognitively and emotionally. And there's so much going on that, I would say there's an uptick in these distortions. And also, like Denisse was saying, sometimes your life experiences cause you to have these distortions. And so on the flip side, if you were to have life experiences that counter these distortions, they can start lessening.
Is there a teen out there who hasn't been catastrophizing things in their lives, especially being on social media?
Or should statements, or blaming, or personalization, or labeling, a lot of all or nothing thinking when you're a teenager. That's just kind of how it is. That's a stage of life where you're just more prone to that because of where your brain is in its development.
You've got more emotions going on. Your hormones are going crazy,
and your feelings feel stronger. I was telling my kids this the other day. One is approaching teenhood imminently, and I was like, when you're a teenager, sometimes your feelings feel so overwhelming. One day you're thinking, oh, I feel a little angry, but then suddenly you're a teenager and you're like, this anger is going to destroy me. It's just very heightened. It's very high stakes a lot of times for teenagers, and so it's helpful, at least for me as someone who works with teenagers, to acknowledge that and to understand that, because a lot of times we dismiss teenagers as being, melodramatic or, irrational. And that's not what's happening. It's just that the feelings feel really strong. Their brain is not in a space yet to rationally kind of talk them down from that feeling.
Think of all the great teen movies we wouldn't have had if teens weren't so emotionally crazy, right?
Yeah, and I find it, I find it endearing. That's why I work with teens, because I don't judge them for that, and ask me in a couple of years when I have 3 teenagers if I still feel the same way.
Is it the 40th year anniversary of The Breakfast Club?
Oh yeah, something like that. They had a reunion.
They all 5 of them were able to finally show up for the first time since they filmed it. You're dealing with different kids, different points of view in that movie. And if you haven't seen this movie, people, please go out and watch it. It's one of the best teen movies of all time.
I know, it's so good.
And they're all dealing with all different cognitive distortions.
Yeah, and it's a good representation of the archetypes, and our brains do that a lot as we try and categorize things and people and feelings and thoughts. And so even to this day, we have, if you go into any typical high school, you're going to see the different cliques and categories forming.
Cool. To wrap this up, Denisse brought up, I think, a really good point in that she had reservations about coming on the podcast because she was nervous and she didn't want to necessarily talk about her issues, but she did. We thank her for that. And we would encourage others to do the same.
And even she acknowledged that the more you talk about something, the more you bring it to light, the lighter the load.
So we would encourage anybody out there listening, please give us a call, reach out, email us. We'd love to have you on the podcast. If you're struggling with family, friends, or coworkers, in a bad relationship and wondering what to do, or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success, then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating. To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook.